So near miss on the hippos. But
Well, they kill more people in Africa than any other mammal, right?
yeah. Well, and now we know that they're good at becoming invasive. You saw there's hippos that live now in Colombia because of Pablo Escobar. Nobody knew what to do with them. Yeah, and they started off with just a handful of them, and now there's like dozens of them down there. And yeah,
What are they doing about that?
Nothing. I think they keep rounding them up and putting them back on his property. Like, what can you do? Sometimes
How much
they
property did he have up there?
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
It's so crazy that you could just have hippos and then they just get loose, and now Colombia has hippos.
He took them there on purpose, though, just like we wanted to bring them here. Can you imagine how bad that would be, though? And I mean, do
Well, that's
people
the wild
eat hippos?
boars in the United States.
Right.
That's William Randolph Hearst. William Randolph Hearst wanted wild pigs on his property. And so he imported them from, I don't remember, it was Russia or somewhere in Europe. And then these wild pigs have now populated all through California. I mean, they're all over the place now.
Yeah, that's crazy. We did have wild pigs around the U.S. at some point. Probably not the same thing, right? Were there wild pigs? There was all
That's a good
sorts
question.
of things.
I think they came over on boats with explorers, and
Maybe there
I know
weren't
William
pigs.
Randolph Hearst. All the ones around like the Northern California area. I think all of those are the remnants of the William Randolph Hearst pigs.
Yeah.
They think.
We don't see them in Alaska, Yukon, where we find all these big stashes of bones coming out of permafrost. So it's probably not that they came over like that. We find bison and horses and mammoths.
Right.
Mostly bison.
Like, where did the wild boars emanate from? Like, what's their original country of origin?
I think, well, I have a friend who works on domestication of pigs, and they've published a bunch of different papers that are always contradicting each other. He gave a hilarious talk at a meeting I was at last week about how he keeps saying something different as a way of, keeping to publish more papers. He was just being nice about how he's open to changing his mind with new data, which I think is a valued trait in a scientist. But yeah, so Southeast Asia or around Asia, I think, is the origin, or at least the domestication. And normally things are domesticated around where they were native.
Well, they're the weirdest animal, right? Because the domestic ones they change, they morph when they go feral really quickly. I think it's like they start within like 6 weeks.
I mean, this is the way evolution works, right? Something has a particular suite of traits.
I'm reading
What's
through
this, Jamie?
the testimony of when this was going on. This is the guy who presented this, and
The hippo thing?
He's talking about pigs right here, where they were going to bring them from northern Manchuria because of.
Were they the most delicious pigs?
They're also talking about bringing in rhinos.
Yeah.
I think they did bring in camels in like 1853.
Oh, well, we had camels. There were North American camels that were here during the ice
Is this like
ages.
a bad test or something? This is
1853?
They're talking about bringing antelopes in, and they asked, like, are they easily tamed or domesticated? He's like, they're very easily tamed.
That's Irwin. So this is a guy who worked for I guess what became the USDA, but he was in charge of apples. But he was really dedicated to trying to solve this meat problem, and he saw importing African animals and animals from other places as the real solution to this. Yeah.
Well, they've definitely done that in Texas. Texas is overrun with African animals.
Well,
All the private ranches,
Yeah.
they're filled with elands and nilgai and
That's cool.
wildebeest. And
well, we used to have so many cool animals here that all went extinct at the end of the Ice Age. So why not? I mean, we had mammoths. Why shouldn't we have elephants?
I know, but isn't it weird? But it's, again, that's the same argument. You bring in an invasive species.
Is it invasive, though, if it used to live here?
Well, it's invasive in a sense that the wolves that are in Colorado right now that are eating all the cattle are kind of invasive.
Yeah, I mean,
Right?
I
They're
think-
not invasive because they do live. I mean, wolves actually just have moved into the San Juans. I think documented like natural migration as opposed to the reintroduction. I think
Yeah.
there was something I read about that yesterday. But the wolves that they've introduced to, like, outside of Aspen in particular, I have a friend who has a ranch out there, and I posted about it on Instagram. He actually sent me some more pictures yesterday. And I was going to post about it, but so much crazy stuff was happening in LA. I'm like, this is not the time to talk about like wolf problems.
Right.
But they're just killing calves and eating their liver. They're not even that hungry. They're just eating the tasty parts and leaving these calves alone. And these people are on a 24-hour run ragged. They have these teams of guys that have to patrol the area 24 hours a day to try to scare off the wolves. And they're not allowed to shoot them, and they spent millions of dollars bringing them there, and they're just eating cattle.
Yeah, I imagine it's really devastating to see something like that happening and know that somebody else made this decision
Yeah.
and that you who actually experience it weren't. I mean, I imagine the people who voted for that, I wonder what they imagined.
Well, it's ballot box biology, right? You get a bunch of people that live in the cities that don't have a lot of experience in nature and wild ecosystems, and then you introduce this idea, we're going to bring wolves back to their native habitat. Oh, that sounds amazing. What they're not telling you is like this, what this rancher told me is that, first of all, the original wolves that were introduced into Colorado were wolves that were taken from Oregon because these wolves were preying on cattle.
Oh,
so they
already had a taste for
exactly,
it. Yeah.
and they already had habits. And so then they brought them into Colorado where they start preying on cattle. And so then they moved them from this area where they were preying on cattle and put them outside of Aspen where they
Prey on cattle.
start preying on cattle.
Yeah.
It's just stupid.
Yeah.
And it's not biologists. It's not their idea. It's ballot box biology. And
This
it's
is
all being
why-
instigated by the Colorado governor.
Yeah, it's so important to actually talk to wildlife biologists and ecologists. I mean, we can see from Yellowstone how important having this keystone predator is in ecosystems where they can be and where there is space for them. But the land is not the same as everywhere as it is in Yellowstone, and we need to be able to make. When I was at Santa Cruz, I taught an introductory biology class for non-majors, where my goal was to give the students tools to be able to think on their own, which is harder than you might imagine. And their midterm exam was a debate, and the topic of the debate was that wolves should be introduced into California.
Why not New York City? Let's go.
Well-
Put them everywhere they used to be. I mean, this is where it gets silly. It's like when you're dealing with people that have cattle ranches, and this is their entire livelihood, and all they're doing now is just compensating them for the calves that get killed, and then so you have less output every year. So it's like the whole thing is crazy. They were already on their way to do a natural migration into Colorado.
Right,
which
and it
could
would have been different
handled.
wolves.
Yes, it would have been different sized wolves too. Because I think there's also like some of the wolves that are being introduced, they're introduced from British Columbia, or they're being introduced from Alberta or somewhere up there. Like I think those are the ones that came into Yellowstone. Like the Yellowstone thing is cool, right? It's been a few decades now. People have kind of like come to this sort of equilibrium, where it's people recognize that there was an overpopulation of elk for sure. I mean, they used to have these hunting seasons where they would hunt them in the snow in the winter because there were so many of them. They wanted you to just be able to pick them out and just shoot them for meat because they really didn't have the resources because they didn't have the apex predators.
Right.
Because a lion can only eat so many of them. So mountain lions weren't really putting the dent in the population that a pack of intelligent hunting cooperative animals like wolves could do. So they brought it back, and it's relatively successful. They've knocked the population of elk down more than 40%, but
Wow.
that's probably good.
Yeah.
I mean, not for the people that hunt elk. They're really mad. But, wolves are cool. It's cool to have them around. But Montana is very different than Aspen.
Right.
It's very different when you're in the mountains of Montana and you see a wolf versus in someone's cattle ranch in Aspen.
Right.
This is stupid. Like, why did you do this?
But what's interesting, this class that I took, so it was a debate that I taught. Sorry, it was a debate. And what I made them do was assume roles of a rancher, a politician, a conservationist. And I had several different roles. And then I randomly assigned whether they were pro or con. And they had a couple of weeks to figure out what their debate was going to be. And I took a vote before the debate. And as you might expect for 18-year-olds in California, you say at the beginning, should wolves be introduced? 100% yes.
Right.
They do this debate, and I did it 4 years in a row. And every year after they had to do this, after they had to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and think about it from their perspective, it would shift. And the majority of people would be like, yeah, no, it's a bad idea. I think if you give people the tools to be able to think, they can imagine themselves in a different scenario. And we need to do that. We need to be arming people with thoughtfulness rather than jumping to a conclusion.
Yeah, and also ballot box biology. It's like if you
but everybody's going to vote. So
right, but you shouldn't be able to vote on things that you're not educated in.
Yeah.
It's like if you allow people to vote on things that have tremendous consequences to the ecosystem, like a reintroduction of an apex predator, and they don't understand those consequences. They just have this very utopian idea of what it means to bring back wolves. Look, I love them. I think they're amazing animals. It's just like putting them in, Calabasas is probably not the best idea.
Right.
Putting them where people live, they're going to eat pets. They're going to eat a lot of things that are penned up, whether they're sheep or goats or whatever people have that they can get at easily. They're not going to chase down a herd of elk. That's hard.
Well, they're biology, right? They're not. They're making decisions on where they can find their next meal.
Exactly.
We're not planning on rewilding dire wolves. Just to
That's great.
Put that out there.
I like that.
Plus, you've met Khaleesi. I don't think she would be.
I bet she will in a couple of years.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, but
I
right
bet
now,
in a couple of years she'll freak you out.
she kind of freaks me out already when you look at her.
Eyes.
But yeah,
Those eyes are so intense. They're so intense. When you look into a predator's eyes, there's something about it. It's like you realize, like, oh my God, I'm like a water balloon. I'm so, we're just like so weak and soft. And
yeah, we've been putting together, not because we're not going to release them. The next step for their lives is to study them and see, how they're changed by their DNA being modified, measure things like their gene expression, their growth, their health span, their lifespan, learn the consequences of the work that we're doing, learn how they interact with the habitat, introduce Khaleesi to her brothers and the next animals that we make into that pack to make a small pack, but they will stay on that secure, expansive ecological preserve that you were.
yes, and you're not going to let them breed.
No, the plan is not to let them breed.
How will you prevent them from breeding?
Well, at the moment they're separated,
Right.
but we'll probably use subcutaneous. You can put an hormonal
Like a birth control
contraceptive.
patch. Right.
There's been some ideas of maybe, so we don't want to castrate them, which would
Right.
obviously be a way to stop it, but because we want them to be able to reach their full size, because we want to know what that would be.
Right.
And we want them to be able to have the hormones to be able to do that. So, but they will be controlled. They're we track them. There's cameras on them all the time. There's 3 separate layers of fencing to keep them in. We know exactly where they are. They couldn't get a splinter without a camera somewhere seeing it, and we know exactly what's going on with them. So yeah, we'll
That sounds like a scene in Jurassic Park. We have it totally
I've
under
seen
control.
that scene. Yes.
Don't worry, we have cameras upon cameras.
Oh, do I sound like the scientist?
No,
from
you
Taylor? I kind of do, actually. I was in Mauritius
Which
working
scientist? Jeff Goldblum was the scientist that
I'm
got
Henry
it.
Wu, right? I'm the chief
Oh.
scientist, right? So I'm a good guy for now.
Right.
But
good
he
guy for
becomes a
now.
bad guy in the future, right? So I'm looking forward to my evil transition. I'm not. We're not making we're not making dinosaurs, but there were other cool animals that we have DNA for. We have I heard you talking about the American cheetah. And,
Yes.
yeah, so we have 2 high quality genome sequences from American cheetah.
Wow.
Maybe we want them back to help with our population problems.
So let's get to the criticisms, because there's people that are saying that these are not dire wolves, that what you've done is just manipulate the DNA of a gray wolf.
They are dire wolves because we have manipulated the DNA of gray wolves. We took dire wolf genome sequences from animals, one animal that lived 72,000 years ago and one animal that lived 13,000 years ago, and we lined them up next to each other and figured out what it is that makes a dire wolf a dire wolf. And then we used the tools of genome engineering to bring those traits back in Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi, that are 3 dire wolves that are alive now. And that has created these animals that you saw that are bigger and they're stronger and they have that dire wolf coat. And that's a cool thing too. That coat, the light coat color that you see, was something that we absolutely could not have known without the ancient DNA, because no one has ever seen a dire wolf. When we published a paper before I joined Colossal many years ago that was about dire wolf evolution, we had a paleo artist reconstruct what dire wolves looked like, and they made them red or reddy brown. And that's because so many other animals seem to be reddy brown, like mammoths are. Neanderthals seem to have had red hair, and so we thought, sure, why not? We didn't know because we hadn't sequenced the part of their genome that we could use to see what color their coats were. But both of these 2 animals that we had higher coverage DNA from had gene variants variants in genes that are associated with pigmentation, how our coats, the hair color and eye color and things like that, that suggested they had light-colored coats. And so we thought, that's cool. We'll have that as one of our key direwolf traits that we're bringing back.
Is it possible that it's like other wolves where there's a variation, but you would only sequence the DNA of ones that had white?
It's possible, yeah. And I'm sure there were different colors, but it's interesting to me that two animals that lived so far apart from each other in time and geography would both have this light color coat. So maybe it wasn't that every direwolf had a light coat, but it must have been a predominant color in the population.
What was the environment in which they lived? So if they lived 13,000 years ago, you're talking about the Ice Age, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that that's why they had white hair?
It's possible. Both of these animals were from northern part of their range where it would have been colder. They did live through previous interglacial periods. 125,000 years ago, it was as warm as it is today, or even warmer, with predicted to be no ice at the poles. And also, we know direwolves were really common around the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. We haven't been able to get any DNA out of anything from La Brea. That would be an amazing discovery.
Does the tar just
do that.
destroys everything?
Don't know if it destroys it or if it gets into the bone in a way that we can't get the DNA out, so somehow inhibiting the recovery of the DNA. We'll get there. I mean, someday we'll figure it out, and that's going to open up a lot of really cool
It kind of makes
animals.
sense that, like polar bears, having that white color would aid. Polar bears actually have, it's clear, right?
Yeah, they have, their hair is long and it's clear in the end. That's why polar bears, and have you seen those pictures of bears in zoos where they look, polar bears in zoos where they look green?
No.
It's
They get covered in moss?
It grows in the hair is hollow.
Whoa.
And so if they're too wet and not cold enough, they can turn this like weird
Oh, they have mold.
inside their hair.
Oh, wow. But it just makes sense that them being that color would have an evolutionary advantage for hunting, because
Yeah.
you're in something that's completely white,
Yeah.
and you don't see like a grizzly bear. You'd see like, oh, look at that dark blob
Yeah.
that's
In fact,
moving towards us.
we did some work in my academic lab where we discovered that polar bears and brown bears hybridize with each other. This is one of those funny stories about academia with a scarcity mindset there, where we submit a grant proposal and we say, hey, we have this really cool observation that polar bears and brown bears hybridized during the last ice age when they overlap with each other, and it gets rejected because they're like, that's dumb, we know that doesn't happen. And then we found another hybrid polar bear from the previous interglacial, and then there's evidence that they're hybridizing today.
Yeah,
and
they find them
hunters
today.
go out and do this. Yeah, so whenever they overlap geographically, they breed. But what's interesting about this is that we always find the hybrids living like brown bears, even though it's probably that the mom is a polar bear. Because a brown bear boy will wake up, from hibernation and go out onto polar bear territory to scavenge for food. And a polar bear female is an induced ovulator, whereas brown bear females are seasonal. So a polar bear female will ovulate in the presence of a male. So the male comes up to her and will mate her. The other way around, if a polar bear brown male had encountered a brown bear female, he's probably more likely to eat her than to mate her, right?
Oh, wow.
And so, but that's weird then. So why do we always find the hybrids living with brown bears instead of living with polar bears? And the polar bear biologists who we've worked with, I've worked a lot of time with Ian Sterling, who's a fantastic polar bear biologist from Canadian Wildlife. And his hypothesis is straightforward, that they can't successfully hunt seals if they don't have that white fur.
Completely makes sense.
It does, right?
Because they have that ability to swim, and they dive under the water, and they're also like really clever in how they use those ice shelves and swim from one ice shelf to another.
Yeah, but they hide they even have those things where they cover their nose with their hand, the black nose with their hand, because the
That's
black
nuts.
nose. I know, it's insane, right?
That's nuts.
Biology's cool.
It is cool. It's cool like to think of like how they became successful doing that. Way. Who figured that out? How do they have the self-awareness to know that the end of their nose is dark and that other animals can see it?
But they also hybridize, just given the chance to do so, right?
Yeah.
Because biology doesn't recognize species concepts, right? Biology
Right.
doesn't care that animal's called a brown bear by us and that animal's called a polar bear.
Right.
They run into each other. They're like, cool, just like our Neanderthal ancestors. Right?
Are those hybrids? Are they fertile? Can they have
Yes.
babies?
Yeah. This is
Interesting.
actually how we discovered it, because we found that the place where brown bears hybridized with polar bears during the last ice age was probably the ABC Islands off the coast of Alaska, because the ice was that far south at the peak of the last ice age. And brown bear boys would move onto the islands as the habitat got better, where they encountered these populations of polar bears that had been stranded there as the ice receded, pretty much. And so they hybridized there. And all brown bears in North America today have ancestry from that admixture with polar bears.
Jeez. Wow. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's just like how we all have ancestry from mixing with Neanderthals.
Look at
And
that.
Is that from the German zoo? Because there's a couple of bears at
But that really looks like a hybrid, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It looks
right.
like there's a lot of traits of both of them.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Bears are some of the most fascinating animals
Those
ever.
claws.
Yeah,
So
it's
impressive.
just an incredible animal. So I'm really glad you said it that way, that nature doesn't know that there's a polar bear and a brown bear.
Why would it?
You're right.
I
It's
mean-
just our definitions.
Yeah.
Is this part of the problem with the criticism of this science? Is that we are being very specific about what we're calling these things based on our own definitions that we've all agreed upon.
Yeah.
But that the true